As soon as I arrived at the library to train, I stopped when I heard Diana's voice erupt from it. Oh boy.
Where is the flower?
It was that flower. Something about that lily she wants.
I believe you were already informed as to what happened to it.
Do not tell me you are blind to its significance.
I peeked into the room, confused as to what was going on. Diana, with a face full of irritated anger, leaned against the mantel of the fireplace as Shadow pored over his scrolls as he usually did. He didn't even look at Diana as he spoke, disinterested in the topic of conversation.
It wasn't needed for the gate spell, so it was deemed unnecessary. It was tossed out as a result of that judgment.
You do realize that flower is one of very few out there in this plane, correct?
And this should bother me... why?
I could practically cut through the tension in the air with a knife. The way they spoke to each other spoke volumes of their disdain for one another. Why was that the case, though? They were working for the same cause. Diana almost snarled, which surprised me.
It should bother you, because as consequence of your thoughtless action, I am putting your scouts in charge of finding another.
And why would I allow this?
Oh dear. Well, that's worrying. I watched as a dark purple and black flame slowly emanated from Diana's body, causing Shadow to look over, straighten up, and take in the sight.
Because while you are their commanding officer, I am the head of this entire rebellion, and my orders outrank yours.
Hard to argue with that. Diana glared hard at Shadow, but I could feel the intensity of her glare from the doorway, making a hard shiver run up my spine. Where did this Diana come from? I recognized her tone, but didn't want to imagine that this was the real her. As Shadow finally sighed, the tension died a bit.
As you wish. Another will be found without delay.
Diana's aura faded as she let out a sigh, calming down from her angry display. Something was wrong with how Diana presented herself. Still, she altered her tone.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Shadow only stared coldly at Diana as she pushed herself away from the fireplace and walked towards the door. Panicked to be found out for eavesdropping, I stepped out of my hiding spot as if I had just arrived, looking into the room. Diana stopped at the sight of me, but closed her eyes and continued walking, arching around me to get by.
Excuse me.
You're excused. I watched as Diana left before walking into the library, now concerned.
You know, you are a terrible spy.
I know. Huh? I looked at Shadow, realizing he knew that I'd been listening in to what had happened, and grimaced. Crap. I rubbed the back of my head, trying to calm myself with the embarrassed nerves racing in my head. Sorry. I was curious about what was happening.
It's nothing to be concerned with, just a waste of time, really. I expect you not to do that again. Do you understand?
Press the question. Yes, sir. Before you stab me. It was better not to question it for now. I would learn eventually, but if Shadow wasn't going to tell me now, there was no way I would be able to force an answer out. Shadow looked to me, observing me for a moment before nodding and turning from the table.
Well then, shall we begin?
I nodded, prepared to face whatever he had in store for me. What took me off guard was someone coming up suddenly behind me and placing a knife at my throat. What?
Dead.
Thanks. I froze. What did she mean? Shadow crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow.
Shama, a little too early.
Well, she was enthusiastic, at least. As the person released me and moved the knife away from my throat, I turned with a hard glare to see the cloaked woman who had been talking to Diana before. She obediently looked to Shadow.
I apologize, sir.
Back to your place.
Well, now I know what's coming. Shama, I think that's how he said it, bowed and quickly formed herself into a shadow, fading into the ground. I instinctively began to follow suit, but Shadow cleared his throat.
Pay no mind to that.
No, you can't just say that. What was that? I had a knife held to my throat without any warning. I was not prepared, and while that may have been some messed up point about war not being prepared, Shadow was watching and could have stopped it. The only thing that ran through my mind was how my body suddenly became filled with adrenaline. Shadow stared blankly at the question and at me.
A misfired trap. Shama is meant to surprise attack you after I teach you your next lesson. Obviously there was a miscalculation, but that'll be fixed and done properly after the lesson is given.
I understood, wanting to be ready the next time it happened, but something caught my attention, drawing my focus away from his words. As I stared at Shadow, I faintly noticed his hair swaying slightly in the air on his head. What the... There was no wind in the room. How is it moving? I focused my attention on his hair, wondering what it was doing as Shadow raised an eyebrow at me.
What are you staring at?
I shook my head and avoided it. Why was I so focused on his hair? It was hair! Have you seen this man's hair? I would die for that hair. As I thought that, however, his ponytail suddenly began to move, like a hand tapping its fingers on Shadow's shoulder and on his waist. Whoa! I jumped back, pointing at his hair and earning a smug smile from Shadow. Why is your hair doing that? And why am I shouting? As Shadow suddenly glared at me, I tensed up.
Are you more interested in the hair or in your training?
I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't going to get anywhere by getting distracted, just like with my curiosity with Diana. If this was another lesson, then Shadow was teaching me properly. Still, my curiosity pecked wildly at me, wanting me to desperately ask about it. But the hair! Oh, I got Controlling Fear achievement unlocked. What does that mean? Shadow raised an eyebrow. I was fearful that he was going to dismiss me afterwards, but I desperately needed to know about the hair. It was just too interesting to ignore now. The ends of Shadow's hair gently moved up in the air, waving their fingers at me like they were dancing over piano keys.
Let me ask you this, human. What would you be willing to trade your soul for?
Are you telling me you traded your soul for being able to move your hair strands individually? Cool. My soul? I stared at Shadow, slightly dumbfounded. He traded his soul for his hair? Now that my focus was on it, the strands of his hair were pitch black. Not even light could pierce them or highlight the strands. How was that possible? Shadow lifted a hand up and ran his fingers over his front ponytail, combing through the darkness.
For me, the answer was simple. To control fear.
You were afraid of your hair? That made absolutely no sense. How does your hair make you control fear? Shadow gazed into my eyes before sighing and lowering his hand. However, as he did, his own shadow slowly rose behind him, as if it were a being itself, and stood silently. The shadow's hair, however, danced around him, revealing not 2, but at least 10 hands splaying from his head, waving through the air in snake-like movements. I felt frightened just staring. The shadow quickly detached itself from its master and began to sprint around the room, taking out every light source and completely covering the room in darkness. What the? It was pitch black in the room. Not even the light of the hallway could be seen. I couldn't spot Shadow or his shadow anywhere. Shadow or his shadow. Causing me to stand still in utter fear. As hands began to crawl along my body and wrap around my arms and torso, I screamed and began to flail, feeling them completely coil around me like snakes. Soon I was trapped in a tight embrace of Shadow.
To completely control darkness is to control fear. To control fear is to control life itself. It isn't enough to simply hold that much power in 2 hands.
Ah. I get it! Let me go! Please! I was frightened to the core. I didn't want to be in this anymore. I was excited about learning about dark magic, but this had quickly become a power I was fearful of. Oh, Angel. At last, the light reappeared in the room, and Shadow stood before me, arms crossed with a small smirk on his face. His 2 ponytails settled onto his body, resting from what they had done. As I no longer felt tied up, I shook out my arms and wrapped them around myself, trying to calm down.
Are there any more questions you intend to waste my time with?
He looked so happy. I became fearful of this man. He was my trainer, but at the same time, he wasn't afraid to make me fear him. It may have just been darkness, but what if he pulled a knife on me like Shama did? Well, you probably wouldn't know that it was him by the time you were dead. I would have been killed in the cover of darkness without any way to fight back. I shook my head, letting out a shaky breath. No, sir. I had to pay attention. No more distractions. I had to focus on the task ahead, or else I would open myself for another unpleasant surprise. Sorry. I'll pay attention. Shadow nodded, rolling his shoulders and forming a pure black dagger in his hand. As he looked at me, I understood what he wanted me to do, having watched his hand carefully. He was not one to actually talk me through anything. I focused on my hand, trying to imagine a dagger forming within it. I rounded my hand to form a shadow across my palm, knowing that I needed the darkness to help give it shape. Slowly, but eventually, the hilt of a dagger formed in my hand, allowing me to grasp it. The blade quickly jutted out at the end, finally completing its formation before I lowered it to my side and looked up at Shadow.
Become aware of your surroundings. Your opponent is using the shadow plane, so you're at a disadvantage. But you can still defend yourself, as long as you pay attention.
That was why my attention was so important. I mentally wanted to slap myself for letting my curiosity take hold of me. Now was not the time to mope, however. I had to focus, and he learned the lesson. I nodded before looking around, trying to figure out how I was going to find Shama and defend myself before she got to me and killed me. I wasn't sure how shadows got around in the other plane, but I was going to find out. I looked to the ground, not seeing anything pass by me, then looked to the light sources. If I remembered anything from the day before, it was that you needed to control the light to distract your target or protect your shadow from being used. I held my breath, trying to focus on the lights versus hearing my breathing whisper through the room. I wasn't going to let her take advantage of me. Suddenly, I faintly hear a flame whip to the side, causing me to turn and see Shama rushing at me with her knife. I quickly parried, pushing her back.
Good. Again.
As quickly as she had come, Shama vanished once again to hide. I could tell I was going to get a workout. Soon enough, she began to attack in plain sight, turn the room dark, even use my shadow against me. I had to maneuver around it all. I continued to fend off her attacks for the entire day until I was excused to my room for the night. Well, it went fairly well, I guess. I entered my room thinking about what Diana had said to me that morning. If I drained myself of energy, then the spirit wouldn't have the power to appear in my dreams. But did I want to do that? I think we should. Erik poofed into existence soon after, exhausted as ever. I continued to ponder as Erik sat down in bed and stretched.
Another long day. How was your day, love?
My mind continued to ponder. I had to make a choice. Did I care if the spirit appeared in my dreams? Yeah, kind of. Plus, it's tiring for Erik to just keep having to save us in our dreams all the time. Come here, boo. I needed rest without bizarre dreams. The spirit needed to stop controlling me and enticing me with its emotions. The question was how to give Erik my energy. I could easily sleep with him and give him my energy through sex, but I wanted our sex to be about the mood, not a means to an end. I looked to Erik and stared, taking in every detail of him. Erik?
What is it?
Kiss me. Erik seemed confused for a brief moment, but eventually smiled, crawling towards me. I leaned forward and smiled as Erik's lips gently pressed against mine. He tasted absolutely sweet against my lips. It was almost intoxicating, the kiss he was bringing me under. I found that to not be fair of him, being that he was naturally an incubus with the ability to make me swoon. But every time he'd kiss me or adjust his ravishment on me made me forget the unfairness of the situation, and allowed me to completely melt into the moment. I wrapped my arms around and pulled him close to me, causing us to fall back onto the bed with him over top of me. Slowly, everything became just about Erik and his love, letting me melt into the sensations we were exchanging. Erik, however, took the moment to pull away softly and stare down at me, looking for permission to continue in my eyes. I knew what I was getting into, so I smiled and pulled him back down to capture his lips again. It was sweet to know how considerate he was about the situation, but I was okay. I let myself go into the moment, closing my eyes and wrapping my legs around Erik. He seemed to get the picture, wrapping an arm behind my arched back and scooting us up to lay with my head in the pillows. Our kiss only intensified as Erik slowly gripped my hips and ground himself between my legs, making me let out a gasp and moan against his lips and causing him to chuckle in reply. I could feel his desire to keep going clear as day between us. He became slow, almost torturously so, as he began to strip himself and me down to become bare to each other. I felt the cool air rush across my skin, making me shudder beneath him. Each kiss he planted on my skin caused a ripple of pleasure to flow through me. It was hard to hold back the moans wanting to escape me, but I allowed a quiet handful out to entice Erik to do more, go further with our foreplay. Looking up at him, his eyes began to glow a familiar gold tint, allowing the fire within my core ignite and burn heavily. I felt my mind become only filled with thoughts of Erik, and screaming his name as passionately as I could. The entire castle would know exactly, would know exactly would know exactly who was receiving my love and whose love I was taking during the night, I guess. There wasn't a need for words to be exchanged as Erik's slow smile grew into a passionate and lustful smirk. His tongue memorized every sweet spot on my body, and he used this knowledge to make my writhe beneath him, ushering me to beg for more. My body was slowly pleading with my mind to let me release my desire and craving out so Erik could satisfy me. However, I wanted to fully give everything, and that meant taking things slow and steady. Erik seemed to understand as he slowly built our foreplay up to where we couldn't even take it anymore, and all we could think about was making love. As we finally gave in, we were both gifted with swift gasps and pleasureful moans at the sensation. The air was hot and steamy as we panted and wrote out our lovemaking, becoming lost in each other's eyes as my mind began to recount everything I loved about Erik. He was devoted, delicate, at the same time, he was everything my body desired. I could only imagine the same thoughts running through his mind as he captured my lips in his and swallowed my moans as they rushed out of my throat. As we apexed, our fingers dug into each other, desperate to ride through our high and simmer into a gorgeously placed afterglow. Our breaths and heartbeats synced, and we were left staring deep into each other's eyes, exhausted but full of love. Oh my goodness, Angel, you really got into the whole role-playing with this guy. I love you, my prince. The feelings of joy that rushed through me caused me to nuzzle into Erik's warm embrace, making him chuckle and kiss over my head, despite being tired himself. Still, the aura around our bodies was perfect for a peaceful passage to sleep. It was surprisingly a peaceful night. It was like Diana actually knew what she was talking about. I woke up, once again alone. However, I knew that Erik was off training. He seemed happy that he was getting back into the swing of it, despite only able to train for a short time before the final battle. However, as I got myself ready, a knock echoed at my door. Huh? Come in. The door opened to reveal a sight I did not expect at all. You! What? What? How? My heart froze in my chest at the man who presented himself at my door.
Huh? What's wrong?
What? Oh no, it's the spirit, isn't it? The spirit's like making somebody, like possibly Erik, look like the Demon Lord. Get away from me! I scrambled back away from the Demon Lord, instantly recognizing him. I found myself against the wall, grabbing the nearest object and chucking it at him. If this was going to turn into a fight, then I would attack after I beamed him with whatever I threw at him. To my surprise, a purple tendril stretched up from the ground in front of him and smacked the object away. How did he have Erik's power? Because it's Erik.
What the? Love, what's wrong?
This is so weird. Why was the Demon Lord calling me love? Oh, okay, calm down. It's not the Demon Lord. Something was off. He wasn't attacking me or doing anything other than standing in place. His face was painted with worry as well, an expression I would never have imagined seeing on the Demon Lord. I held my head and closed my eyes, trying to calm down. This had to be the spirit's doing, just another trick. She's trying to get back at us because we, made love with our prince. Stop it.
Princess, what's going on?
Oh, thank goodness, it's good to see you. I opened my eyes again to see Erik with a face etched with worry and panic. And the tentacle by his head was the object I had thrown at him, but he stood where the Demon Lord was. How? I buckled down onto my knees and curled over myself, wrapping my arms around my body. This was too frightening, too real. What was happening? I looked up to see the spirit floating silently behind Erik before fading away. I knew it, but how was the spirit able to make Erik look like the Demon Lord? It was a twisted method if it was trying to get me to like it. She's probably just mad because I've been calling her Ophelia for like, I don't know, 4 videos when her name's Orabelle. Sorry, Orabelle. Erik knelt down and gently wrapped his arms around me, nuzzling my head.
Shh. It's okay.
I barely noticed that I was shaking and whimpering. I couldn't really stop myself. The man who had trapped me here appeared before my eyes all of a sudden. Then he vanished into the man I swore to love. Erik kissed the top of my head.
The spirit must be playing tricks on you again. We'll remove it soon enough. I promise.
I nodded, believing in what Erik said. This would only last a short while. Then the spirit would be gone. Oh, more training. The minute I stepped into the library, Shadow turned from his scrolls to look at me. That was a first. Was he going to greet me properly now? His raised eyebrow threw me off, though, as if he wasn't expecting me. I walked to the center of the space, summoning my dark dagger and becoming mentally ready for more reactionary defense training. However, Shadow raised his hand to me, causing me to relax a bit.
Your training is over.
Really? Already? Wait, what? What did he mean? I opened my mouth to protest, but Shadow held his stern gaze.
I have taught you how to defend yourself, and how to traverse a plane that renders you temporarily untouchable. That was all I was required to teach. You are free to train on your own without a mentor now.
I felt like I was tossed into the deep end of a lake. I wasn't told anything about losing my trainer at any point. Still, I knew that what he was saying was the truth. He was right. I wasn't expected to learn how to really fight or how to beat someone. All this training was to give me the ability to defend myself. I had completely forgotten about the reason I had even started. Still, I wanted to learn more. I felt that I was losing a golden opportunity, and I wanted to push forward to learn something extraordinary. It was one thing to duck and dodge an invisible opponent, but it was another to truly use dark magics. Shadow turned away and went back to the table.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I must return to my research. We have a siege in less than 3 days, and I can't waste any more time.
That hurt a bit. I was wasting his time? I felt some part of me yell that I had wasted my own time. Why was I even here? I got pulled in with your beautiful looks. Teach me something else. Shadow looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with me. However, he didn't say anything. I could feel his gaze burn into my eyes, judging my words and my desire to learn. I wanted to know something else. I didn't want my training here to end with me going off on my own. I had only trained for 2 days, for goodness sake. I wanted more. Shadow slowly straightened and turned to face me, crossing his arms.
Very well. I would like to see if you are able to perform a rather difficult spell.
Okay. I suddenly became confused. Was it truly something powerful? I thought of 100 things he was going to teach me, but I remained at attention, listening.
The spell I'm about to teach you will become your best weapon in battle. However, it takes a large portion of energy. You may not even stay conscious after casting it. Are you prepared to try?
He's experimenting again. Because as we all know, Angel has, like, crazy amounts of energy. And he's always surprised by, like, oh, she was in the Shadow Realm longer than I thought. Interesting. I took a moment to consider it. While it seemed powerful, something about it seemed off. I could possibly pass out. Why would I essentially be jumping levels so fast? Was this something I should be afraid of? Heck yeah. I wanted to know. I wanted to experience something new, and if this power was going to be, as he said, my greatest weapon, then I had nothing to lose. It would be worth the attempt. Shadow stared at me for a moment, most likely judging me like he usually did, before nodding and pointing to the wall away from the fireplace.
There.
I looked over and became lost. I saw my own shadow simply lying against the wall and flickering slightly from the firelight. What was he wanting me to do with it? Before my eyes, my trainer's own shadow crawled up the wall beside mine and began to peel itself off of the wall. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was almost cartoon-like. Soon enough, his shadow was standing on its own in midair, away from the wall. He was teaching me how to use my shadow? I closed my eyes, trying to focus and concentrate, before looking to my shadow and attempting to will it off of the wall. It wouldn't move, much to my displeasure, causing me to focus harder. It had to come off of the wall somehow. My shadow began to quake and almost shudder against the wall in defiance, making me glare hard at it. Come on. It shook violently before finally starting to push itself off of the wall into a full three-dimensional being. I stared as it settled onto its feet and stood at attention for me, as if it were awaiting my orders. This was by far one of the coolest things I had done. I felt my energy pulse, straining slowly to maintain the spell, and took a breath. Shadow, however, clapped his hands a couple of times.
Well done, human.
I grinned back at him before watching him form a dark sword in his hand and pass it to his shadow with a look of confusion. At his silence, I tried to mirror him, forming a shadowy blade in my hand the same way I'd formed my dagger and passing it to my shadow. For some reason, staring at my shadow holding a sword seemed off to me, but maybe that was because I was a human casting this magic for the first time. There were always times for firsts, after all, and this was definitely an impactful first. Shadow lifted his hand and pointed towards the door. Obeying the silent command, his shadow walked over to the door and stood guard. How did it know to do that without being told? Of course, Shadow wasn't going to tell me. I looked at my shadow and tried to think of what I could have it do. There were so many things it was hard to decide. Gazing around the room, there were many places it could go. However, I became curious about the upper level of the library. I pointed into the air at the upper balcony, feeling the need to verbalize my demand echo through my body. Go. With a blink, my shadow crouched and leapt off of the ground, almost flying through the air and grabbing onto the railing of the upper floor. I stared, jaw dropped, as it vaulted itself over the ledge and turned back to face me. Whoa. I looked to Shadow, seeing him give a mildly impressed smirk towards my shadow.
I'm rather shocked. It's a shame to think that you're merely a human. You'd make a fine assassin.
Such compliments. There was a genuine compliment. I was a little surprised to hear him say that without some kind of insult tacked on, but I quickly shook it off. If I had learned anything from this experience, it was to not let my guard down. Luckily, I didn't. I smirked as I noticed Shadow's own entity try and creep up on my shadow. In reply, I quickly shouted, "Defend!" My shadow acknowledged my command, and as if it knew where its enemy was, it turned and braced itself as my trainer's shadow tried to slice through it. Both swords clashed, causing a splash of dark matter to erupt from the impact, but as soon as it happened, Shadow dispelled his entity with a smirk of his own.
Well done. Very well done.
My goodness, we've come so far. I grinned from ear to ear, my shadow disappearing on its own. However, Shadow raised an eyebrow.
Your practice is not over. Again.
I felt another smirk grace my lips. Finally. I trained through the day, stopping every now and then when my energy was low and refueling with food and a break. I was happy to have this new ability, but he hadn't been kidding. It definitely wore me out. Well, that's good. Spirit won't come back. Entering my room, I felt heavy. To think that I had attacked Erik that morning was horrifying. I could have hurt him. I didn't want to hurt him. Then again, I had thought he was the Demon Lord. I had every reason to be frightened and try to fight. But if he had appeared for real, would I have been able to stop him? I was training, yes, but only to defend myself, not to kill anyone.
I can help, you know?
Huh? The spirit was enticing me again? The room around me felt frozen in time once again. You can help me with what?
With a lot of things, actually. If you want, I can give you really cool powers.
Bribery is the next thing, eh? Why are you being so friendly?
Huh? I always wanted to help you.
The spirit was making little sense. I was already training and I was completely tired. I closed my eyes and looked away. I can take care of myself.
Well, if you need any extra power, let me know. I can keep nasty people away, just like last time.
Maybe we'll reverse psychology this. But you'll get hurt. My words seemed to silence the spirit for a moment before it spoke again, as if unresolved.
I still want to help you. You shouldn't be pushed around by that icky man.
Erik isn't pushing me around.
It's only a matter of time, though.
I looked at the spirit, somewhat insulted. Did it really doubt my ability to protect myself? What do you mean?
You're a human. Humans aren't as powerful as demons. Especially not the evil man.
Before my eyes, the room around me shifted to the interior of a dungeon. Oh no, not this again. I panicked, looking around while being trapped in place. Smoke slowly eased into the space from the dark corners, making me cough and wheeze. What was the spirit doing? Stop it!
Use my magic!
What? I felt a soft glow in my chest. For some reason, I felt calm and the air became easier to breathe in. Was this the spirit's doing? Soon, fire began to peek in and I was surrounded in flames. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to lean away from the heat.
A human can't survive in the demon world, but I can help you. I can protect you.
Stop this vision now! This was getting ridiculous. How could this be happening? Was I somehow in a dream? This was out of control, and I needed to find some form of freedom. All of a sudden, the flames around me vanished, and I was back in my room, staring into the empty space with the spirit in the middle.
Why won't you let me help you? I'm stuck in your body.
I don't need your help. I have Erik. Those words slipped out. A brief silence followed before the spirit spoke again.
The icky man is related to the evil man, right?
Erik? That came out of nowhere. I guess I never really thought about it that way. He is the evil man's son. So it does kind of make sense from her standpoint that Erik could also be evil. Okay. That came out of nowhere. I nodded, knowing what she asked. Erik is the Demon Lord's son. What? Was the spirit concerned that Erik was evil too? Hold on. Defend Erik. Just because he's the Demon Lord's son doesn't make him a bad guy.
Does he really love you?
I stared at the spirit, trying to see where that question was going. It was trying to sway me, so I smiled and nodded. Erik indeed loved me, more than anything. He does. I know it.
And if he doesn't? What if he's lying?
He wouldn't lie to me.
He could be. Demons always lie to get what they want. I was lied to.
You were?
Someone, a person, made a promise to protect me. But they didn't.
The room became darker and colder as the spirit began to suddenly cry. I felt horrible listening to it weep. Before I could comfort it, though, it vanished into the air, leaving me in the room as time began to move forward once more. I rubbed my head. This was getting ridiculous. When was I going to be free of the spirit? I was becoming more anxious by the day. Even as Erik came into the room, I felt my worry about the situation grow. I barely noticed as Erik finally entered the room. He slowly entered, most likely cautious from what had happened that morning. As memories of what happened appeared in my mind, I couldn't help but frown. I had attacked him. The spirit was trying to make me hurt the man I loved, and I couldn't have felt more shamed for falling for its trick. I looked up at Erik with sad eyes, surprising him as he closed the door at last behind him and walked to join me on the bed. Erik, I'm sorry.
Love, it's all right.
Erik wrapped his arms around me and nuzzled my head. I closed my eyes and relaxed into the embrace, feeling him gently drain me of energy. I didn't fight back. I felt no reason to.
I know it's not your fault.
But I still almost hurt you this morning. My guilt consumed me as I buried my face in Erik's chest. Erik, in reply, ran his hand over my head and held me close. I was upset, and I had every reason to be. I could only hope that the spirit would be taken out soon.